and welcome to another episode of the Dgmg podcast. My name is Zoe Lulinski, and today my plan is just giving you guys my new top 10. There's a couple new big moves. There's a couple big moves, a couple new teams back in there, back in the mix, especially heading into the postseason soon. I can't believe it's already week 16. I feel like I just started making this podcast. I feel like I just started watching football games this season. Maybe it's because I'm a Bears fan, but it seems like the season's a little short. But anyway, I'm going to be giving my top 10, talking about some quarterback news. Jalen Hurts got hurt this past week early in the game against the Commanders, which I think will have a big effect depending on how long he's out. And then just a couple other takeaways, some of the most surprising teams as we're heading into the postseason soon. So without further ado, let's talk about the value of Jalen Hurts. I think we learned a lot about Jalen Hurts and the Eagles team in this past game against the Commanders. He suffered a concussion in the first quarter, so he really didn't get much time to play, and I think that showed us a lot about the team in general. And I'm not even talking about his play. I just mean his effect in general. He's thought of as a top 5, top 10 quarterback in the league, and I think that has a lot of impact on how teams prepare to play the Eagles and how teams play defenses in general against them. I think they rely a lot on the running. A lot of people call Jalen Hurts a tush-push merchant. I think he's definitely more than that, but he definitely hasn't had an amazing year. I think it's pretty average. Not bad, not holding them back, but definitely not amazing. But I think this showed the value of Jalen Hurts to the team. They still scored 33 points. They lost by 3. But I think if Jalen Hurts had been in, they would have won that game. Of course, you could look at all the receiver drops towards the end of the game. Devontae Smith with that really unlikely drop by him, uncharacteristic for sure. But I just think it's more about the impact of Jalen Hurts as a player. Saquon Barkley had over 100 yards in the first quarter and then was held to 34 yards the rest of the entire game. And I think a lot of that plays into how the defense prepares for Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is a very dangerous runner to the team, especially so that combination of Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley plays a big part in how defenses would play them. And without him, I think that makes a big impact. And then also you look at Saquon scored majority of their points, so I don't even think I think Kenny Pickett played okay. He had a couple bad plays, bad interception. I think he was trying to do too much, trying to prove too much. He had trouble with some of his accuracy. So I think that also just shows the offense relies a lot on Saquon Barkley, but there is a value in Jalen Hurts as a player. And depending on how long he's out, that's going to have a big impact on the Eagles. I think if he is out for an extended period of time, or at least the next 2 weeks, as we're heading into the postseason, they will miss out on that 1 seed. That 1 seed's in competition with the Vikings and Lions right now, which is just insane to think about since they're in the same division. Speaking of the NFC North, though, Sam Darnold is a guy I'm really intrigued in. I think he is a top 5 quarterback. There's only 4 quarterbacks that I would take above him. That would be Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and Jared Goff. I think other than that, this season, Sam Darnold's playing better than Patrick Mahomes. He's playing better than some of these other guys that you would consider to be better. Justin Herbert is another one. I would take him. I would be very confident. I would be very confident if I were the Vikings in their playoff push. They're 13-2. Same with the Lions. It's very entertaining. That whole division is insane, and I've mentioned this many times before. And I think Sam Darnold, I don't think he's going to win. Like I've said before many times, I think Josh Allen is the front runner to win MVP, but Sam Darnold should easily be in that conversation. He's having a career year. He's looked really good, and he's been a big part of these Viking wins. I think you could give a lot of credit to Kevin O'Connell, who I think it would be the coach of the year if the season ended today. But within these last 6 games, Sam Darnold has had a 15-1 touchdown interception ratio. So I think a lot of the winning these past few weeks and even the whole season can be attributed in a majority to Sam Darnold. And of course, Brian Flores with that defense, his defensive scheme is really good. And just given the circumstances of this team in general, this team was not considered to be very good. And they only have 2 losses heading in the final 2 weeks of the season, looking for that number 1 spot in the entire conference. So we got to give Sam Darnold credit where it's due. I'm really happy to see him play well. Had a rough start to his career, but if he can be one of those other players, one of those veteran quarterbacks that can jumpstart his career. That's always really cool to see. And then that kind of leads me into the most surprising teams, in my opinion, this year. This isn't in any particular order, but the first team I have is the Vikings. Kevin O'Connell, I'm pretty sure, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's his second year with the team. They're looking great. Brian Flores with that defense has created a very threatening defense, top in the league, especially the early games, beating the 49ers and Texans, who obviously have not met expectations fully this year. Sam Darnold as well. Jordan Addison is stepping up after his rookie season, after being in the league for a little while. He's becoming a really solid second threat. You got TJ Hawkinson, who had some injuries. You had Justin Jefferson. Adding Aaron Jones as a running back, I think, has been a major piece on the offense. And according to ESPN, they had the Vikings at 25 out of the entire league, so 25 out of 32. And now I have them rated at number 4. They are 13-2, competing for that number 1 spot, like I said, in their conference in the NFC. Majorly outbeat any expectations anyone had for them, except maybe Vikings fans, of course. But I think Vikings fans even might have been worried a little bit, especially with J.J. McCarthy being out, who I'm still very excited to see whenever he gets a chance to play. So that's the first team I'll talk about. San Francisco is another one. According to ESPN, so all these are going to be referenced from ESPN. According to ESPN, they had San Francisco as the number 1 ranked team in the entire league. And honestly, I kind of agree. Coming into the season, they just lost the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. I had them as one of the favorites to win. They've had a solid team. Brock Purdy has looked really good. George Kittle. They have so many weapons. Their defense, but they've battled a lot of injuries this year and a lot of adversity. I think that's a big thing that they've faced. Nick Bosa's been out. Brock Purdy's been out. Ayuk's been out. The list goes on and on. Christian McCaffrey. And then, they've gone down to their 3rd and 4th string running back. So that's a lot of injuries they've had to deal with. It's not just at fault for the team play in general. It's the injuries, and you really can't predict that, can't control that. So it's been tough for them. I expected them to be number 1, number 2 seed in the entire conference, and they're kind of competing for a playoff spot right now. Might not even make it. If the season ended today, they would not be in. And then third, I have the Commanders. I feel like I mentioned this before, but new coach, new quarterback with Dan Quinn and Jayden Daniels, a rookie quarterback at that. I don't think anyone would expect them to have the record they do. They're competing for the number 1 spot in their division with the Eagles. They just beat the Eagles this past week. Of course, Jalen Hurts was out, but that's a big win for them. They've looked really good these last few weeks. Jayden Daniels is insane. He's going to win Rookie of the Year for sure. If he doesn't, that's crazy to me. But again, according to ESPN, they were rated 28 out of all the teams this season. So even worse than the Vikings. They had no expectations coming in, and they've had one of the most fire offenses coming into the season now with those first few weeks. And this defense is getting better and better with Marshawn Lattimore, so another big surprising team. And then the final 2 I do have some honorable mentions as well, but the New York Jets. Again, ESPN had them at number 13 out of 32 teams. So another team that has not met expectations in the slightest. They are in conversation to even have a number 1 pick, top 5 pick. Aaron Rodgers was expected after that first season and come out slinging. A lot of people even had them in Super Bowl conversations. I think that was a little much. I know how old Aaron Rodgers is. Aaron Rodgers has looked a little bit better towards the end of the season, but that defense is on and off, inconsistent. I think they're pretty solid. They still have a lot of solid players on their team, but they just have not met expectations. They fired their head coach after 5 games, which I could have said is a mistake. They should have given Robert Saleh at least a little longer. I don't think that helped them this season, but they definitely didn't meet expectations in the slightest. And then this 5th team, again, in no particular order, I have the Broncos. Again, they were another team that drafted a rookie quarterback, got rid of Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson struggled with the team, and he's actually looking pretty solid with the Steelers now. So I just don't think he clicked with the team, but they drafted Bo Nix, who a lot of people did not have high expectations for Bo Nix, myself included. I thought there were definitely a plethora of quarterbacks from this year's draft that would have been a better option. Bo Nix is a little older than these guys, so I think he was definitely more ready than some of these players. I just didn't have high expectations. There were many other quarterbacks drafted before him. But, I mean, he completely beat any expectations he had, and I think that's a big part of the team in general as well. If it weren't for Jaden Daniels, would probably win Rookie of the Year. He has, off the top of my head, so this might be slightly off, but 22 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. He's done really solid. This is a great rookie campaign. Bring the Broncos to a potential playoff run. If the season ended today, they would also be in the playoffs. So this is it's really cool to see all these rookie quarterbacks playing so well. I think this rookie quarterback class and rookie class in general has been pretty solid. And then if you want to touch on the defensive side of the ball, that defensive side of the ball for the Broncos has also stepped up. So with that being said, that was the top 5 most surprising teams, in my opinion, this year. With honorable mentions are the Browns, Bears, and Bengals. You could talk about some other teams, but, the Bengals, they're electric on offense. I thought they were going to make the playoffs this year. Technically still in the conversation, except I don't think they're going to get there. They're going to be around 500. Joe Burrow is having an MVP caliber season, but that defense has looked atrocious, especially the first half of the season. So that's going to be something they have to fix up. Bears, I didn't expect the Bears to be that amazing. I mean, rookie quarterback. I was curious about that decision to keep Eberflus with other guys like Jim Harbaugh that were hired. I just think there were guys that they could have looked at to potentially progress. I expected them to at least have 7 to 9 wins, being a wild card team, especially in the division that they have with the Lions, Packers, and Vikings. I mean, all these teams are in double-digit wins, so that's a hard division to play in. But I did not expect them to only have 4 wins coming into the last 2 games of the season. The defense has fallen apart since Matt Eberflus is fired. The offense couldn't put it together. They're very inconsistent. At times they're scoring, at times they're not. Can't score in the first half. There's just a lot of things to work out. The offensive line has been dealing with injuries all season. The defensive line has dealt with injuries as well. So, I mean, I'm not making excuses. They just didn't meet expectations for me. And then, the Browns, again, another team that didn't meet expectations. Deshaun Watson did not play nearly as well as I expected him to. And then he had that Achilles injury. Just tough. Those were the surprising NFL teams for me this season. And finally, heading into my top 10 teams, heading into Week 17, at number 1, I have the Bills. They just barely scratched out a win against the Patriots. And again, like I've said with the Chiefs and other teams, I think these late-game wins are actually positive. You could look at the negatives. They almost lost to a team that has a top 5 draft pick. But this is a divisional game. Drake May is young. He's made plays. I think divisional games are a whole different type of game. There's always close matchups, no matter how good the teams are. Raiders play the Chiefs well almost every year, just for an example like that. And I think, if anything, they found a way to win, which I think is the most important. Josh Allen, who is, in my opinion, the MVP of the season, did not have the greatest game. Obviously, it wasn't horrible, but it wasn't great, and yet they still found a way to win, push through that. They're number 1 for me. At number 2, I have the Chiefs. They had a solid win. They're 14-1, so they're number 1 in the conference right now. And, I mean, I hate to say it, but they're still finding ways to win, They are 14-1 for a reason. I know there's some questionable calls that you could look at, some questionable decisions, but that's all they need. They're number 1 in the conference. If they get the bye week 1, I mean, who knows? They can make the Super Bowl again. I think they're at least going to reach the championship round. At number 3, I have the Lions. Despite all their injuries, they're still playing really great. Of course, they did play the Bears, a weak opponent. They played a couple of weak opponents here and there. The real test for them is going to be against the Vikings in Week 18, that final week. I think that's going to be a really exciting game to watch against the Vikings. But despite all their injuries, they're still playing well. They have a lot of fun and creative plays. That fake fumble play, fake falling play, whatever you want to call it, with Jared Goff and Jahmyr Gibbs was hard to watch as a Bears fan. But they're really good, very fun to watch. Ben Johnson's done a great job. Dan Campbell's done a great job. Aaron Glenn's done a great job. Both Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson are both candidates for head coaching jobs, if that tells you anything. And number 4, moving up a couple spots, I have the Vikings. Vikings looked really good. They had a close game against the Seahawks. Sam Darnold is looking great. The defense is looking great. if it's not Justin Jefferson, it's TJ Hawkinson or Jordan Addison. They have so many weapons on offense. At number 5, I have them dropping a little bit. They're definitely still a top team in the league, but with that injury to Jalen Hurts, I'm just like I did with the Lions, I pushed them down a little bit last week, but they're still proving they're a top-notch team. I just have to say the Eagles have to do the same. I want to see continuously how they play without Jalen Hurts unless he comes back, which, of course, is the best thing to happen. Saquon Barkley is the best player on their team, and if he gets shut down, I'm curious to see how they'd play without a running game like that. So I have them at 5. Number 6, Packers shut out the Saints, which just really rare. No matter how bad or how good a team is, that just you don't see that often in the NFL. Packers at number 6 really could be higher. Blew out the Saints. Not a great team. And, Love is almost having that 2023 type of season where later in the season he just doesn't throw interceptions. He really locks it up towards the end of the season, and that's why they had such a push last year. So, they really could have something like that again this year. We'll see. So, at number 6, I have the Packers. And number 7, I have the Ravens. They're really turning it on. Lamar Jackson had another 3-touchdown game, so he's looked really good. MVP caliber year for Jackson. Again, there's a lot of competition this year, actually. Just building momentum at the right time heading into these last few weeks of the season. And then at number 8, moving up a couple spots as well, I have the Commanders. Again, they just beat the Eagles. They had a really solid outing. Marshawn Lattimore added to that defense has looked really solid. They did let up 33 points, but it's just a really good competitive game coming back against the Eagles. Just say what you want about Jalen Hurts going out. The Eagles are still a really good team. And, again, they're also a team building momentum at the right time. And then at number 9, I have the Steelers. They've lost back-to-back games against the Ravens and Eagles, 2 playoff teams, so that's a bit of a downside. And then they do have a couple of key injuries. I think George Pickens should be coming back Christmas Day, so Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to everyone out there. But they have a couple of injuries they're dealing with, so I dropped them a bit. And then at number 10, I have the Rams, which is, I think, a new addition. I don't think I've had them in my top 10 yet this year. They just have so many weapons on offense with Stafford, Williams, Puka, and Cooper Kupp. So, that's it right there. Kyren Williams had another good game. They just beat out the Jets in a close matchup there. And then the Rams defense is not all that great. They're pretty young, but I think they showed a bit of potential there in that game. And then just some honorable mentions. Chargers and Broncos. They've been in and out of the top 10 these last few weeks, and they could very easily be in the top 10. Chargers just beat the Broncos this past week. Both playoff teams, in my opinion, and especially if the season ended today, they would be. So they could very easily be in the top 10. And then just same with the Texans. Texans are looking to be building back up after a couple woes early in the season. Unfortunately, Tank Dell did get injured and will be out for the rest of the season, so they're dealing with a couple injuries. They did just sign Deontay Johnson, who has had a lot of drama with the Ravens, so I'm curious to see how that goes. But don't get me going. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you for listening.